Today, Moscow and Beijing call each other partners, but their past is far from perfect. Just a few decades ago, they were on the brink of nuclear war, a forgotten border conflict that almost nobody talks about. To understand how it got that serious, we need to step back to March 1969. The river ice cracked under boots. A Soviet patrol stepped onto a small island on the Ussuri River. Then the shooting started. First a single shot, then bursts, then constant fire. The men dropped flat, and they crawled behind a narrow row of bushes for cover. Across the ice, soldiers in winter camo moved in, silent and organized, like they had drilled this exact move many times. It was March 1969. The island had no people, no resources, and hardly any trees. But the small patch of ice was about to drag two nuclear powers to the brink. This place had two names: Zhenbao in China, Damansky to the Soviets. And the reasons for this fight began years before anyone pulled the trigger. To see why, we have to start with how two brothers turned into rivals. On paper, China and the Soviet Union were supposed to be brothers in arms, but by the mid-1960s, this partnership had dissolved into a bitter rivalry. They argued over everything: ideas, borders, and the very future of the socialist world. Beijing said Moscow had gone soft. Moscow said Beijing was pushing chaos. Propaganda went up in Chinese streets. Slogans got louder, crowds got bolder. The split wasn't just theory, it changed daily life. Soviet diplomats in China sent their families home because safety was not guaranteed. In the USSR, leaders tried to keep the argument quiet. Most people heard very little about it. Even many officers along other parts of the border did not believe a real fight with China could happen. But the Ussuri River turned the argument into action. In winter, the river froze hard. People could walk across it like a road. That made the border easy to test and easy to cross. What started as words soon became shoving, grabbing, and standoffs on ice. And once the river became the stage, the tone of the story changed from talk to contact. And the first sign that this would not stay peaceful showed up on the ice, not in a speech. At first, the incidents looked small. Farmers and fishermen drifted close and said they were still on their own side. Then, groups of young activists, fired up by politics, came to the ice and pushed hard. There were shoves, sticks, and attempts to pull a border guard back as a trophy. Soviet patrols fired warning shots in the air to stop it and to pull their men free. In one case, near another island, a Soviet officer used an armored vehicle to break up a dangerous crowd. People were hurt. Some did not make it. After that, there was a pause. Then, winter returned, the river froze again, and the scuffles came back with more planning. The groups on the Chinese side looked more organized, more disciplined, and more ready for something bigger. Patrols on both sides now moved under watchful eyes. Small talks over a line in the snow turned into tense face-offs with rifles nearby. By early 1969, it no longer felt like random pushing. It felt like someone had a plan. And that plan showed itself on a tiny island, where a morning patrol walked into an ambush. Before dawn on March 2nd, Chinese troops crossed the ice and took positions on higher ground on the island. They used white camouflage and dug in. A Soviet patrol stepped out onto the island, thinking it would be routine. Then heavy fire hit them. The first minutes were chaos. Leaders went down. Radios struggled. Soldiers hugged the ice, fired at muzzle flashes, and tried to pull each other back behind wherever cover they could find. This was not a spontaneous brawl, it was a planned attack. The fight lasted for hours. When it slowed, both sides rushed reinforcements toward the island. Each capital put out its own version of what happened. Each blamed the other. The losses shocked the units along the river. The calm days of winter patrols were over. Now the island mattered, and both armies treated it like a test of will. The next round came 2 weeks later, and it was louder, heavier, and far more costly. On March 15, both sides returned to the island in force. From the Chinese bank, loudspeakers blasted messages, telling Soviet soldiers to ignore bad orders and go home. On the island, A small Soviet group of around a few dozen men with several armored personnel carriers set up defenses under a low gray sky. Then the ground shook. Chinese artillery and mortars opened at once. 3 infantry companies pushed forward. Several Soviet vehicles were hit. The defenders moved, fired, fell back, and held where they could. The battle surged across snowdrifts and scrub. At one point, Soviet T-62 tanks tried to push the attackers off the southern end of the island. One tank was disabled and left on the ice. The commander was hit as he tried to get clear. The machine, brand new for that time, did not make it back. By late afternoon, it was clear the small Soviet group could not hold without help. Commanders on the Soviet side made a hard choice. They used a new type of truck-mounted rocket artillery. A salvo hit the staging areas behind the front line. When the smoke thinned, the island went quiet again. Officially, neither side wanted to admit how far this had gone. Unofficially, everyone who had crouched on that ice knew this was now a real fight between two states, not a border scuffle. But the most talked about symbol of that day was not a headline or a speech, it was a single tank and what happened to it. The disabled T-62, often identified as number 545, became a prize. The Soviets didn't want a modern tank left to the other side to study. The Chinese wanted to recover it, to show they could take a top machine from a superpower. Several attempts to destroy the tank failed. In time, Chinese units managed to pull it to their side. Today, a T-62 from that battle stands in a military museum in Beijing. Even when the river quieted, the tension did not fade. It shifted to a different point on the map, hundreds of miles away. And that second flashpoint made it clear this was not a one-off event on one small island. In August 1969, far to the west, near a salt lake called Zhelenoshkol on the Kazakh frontier, Soviet border units and the Chinese detachment traded fire. This clash was fast and decisive. The Soviets pushed the attackers back before the fight could spread. But the message was clear, the crisis could jump to new places along a very long border. People outside the region began to worry about what might come next. Western analysts used a word no one wanted to hear: nuclear. Both sides had nuclear forces. If local fights kept popping up, what would happen if one went wrong? What if a local commander misread an order? What if a shell fell on the wrong side at the wrong time? In public, both governments kept strong language. In private, both also knew they had to control the risk. In September 1969, something rare happened. Two leaders met face to face and pressed pause. But before the pause, the crisis had already changed global politics in a way most people did not see yet. On September 11, 1969, Soviet Premier Alexei Kosygin met Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai during a brief stopover in Beijing. The meeting was short and tense, there was no grand agreement, but it did the key thing, it cooled the line. Both sides told their forces to stop shooting along that stretch and to keep talking, even if the talking was slow and careful. The immediate danger dropped, the long argument stayed. What followed were years of low-level talks. The two sides worked through maps, islands, bends in rivers, and old treaties. It took until 1991, right before the Soviet Union itself collapsed, for the main pieces of the border settlement to get signed. The island at the center of the 1969 fight is today on China's side of the line. On the Russian bank, memorials honor the men who did not come home. The diplomatic track also had a wider effect. In Beijing, leaders looked at the map and saw the USSR as the near threat. That made a careful opening to Washington more attractive. Step by step, China and the United States moved towards talks, then visits, and then a new balance. The triangle between the US, the USSR, and China changed the Cold War, and the frozen river in 1969 helped push it in that direction. So, did the Soviets win in 1969? If you look at the map today, the island is Chinese territory. If you look at the world stage, the crisis pushed China toward a new path that reshaped the 1960s. Today, Russia and China often present a united front. But in March 1969, a small island on the Ussuri River showed how fragile that could be. A patrol walked onto snow. Gunfire turned a routine morning into a crisis. 2 weeks later, artillery, tanks, and rockets pushed the fight right up to a line no one wanted to cross. Months later, another clash showed the danger could spread. Only a quick meeting between two premiers put a lid on it. Years of careful talks finally fixed the map. Damansky to one side, Zhenbao to the other. No people, no gold, hardly any trees. Yet, this small place forced two nuclear powers to step back and think. It helped push a major shift in global politics. The lesson is simple. Borders are not just lines on paper. They are places where pride, fear, and history meet. On some days, even small piece of ground can decide whether a problem stays local or shakes the world. If you want to see more stories about forgotten battles and surprising historical events, subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss our next video. See you next time!